Picture it. You are 8 months pregnant, bleeding, and in terrible pain, all alone in a luxury penthouse. You manage to call your husband, the one person who promised to always keep you safe, only for him to say, "You are just overreacting," before ending the call. This was the nightmare Grace Holloway was living. As she lay dying on her bathroom floor, her husband was celebrating with investors, sipping champagne. But this was not the end of her story, because the person who ultimately came to her rescue was her husband's biggest rival, a billionaire. What happens when the deepest betrayal leads to a new beginning? When the husband who abandoned her vanishes from her life, and the man who despised him steps in to become the father her children truly needed? This is a tale of anguish, vengeance, and ultimate triumph. And I promise, the conclusion will take your breath away. If you are a fan of stories that get your heart pounding and make you root for the underdog, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe. You will not want to miss what happens next. This story carries a powerful message for every woman who has ever felt invisible in her own marriage. It is a reminder that you cannot shrink yourself into being loved, that sometimes the person meant to save you is yourself, and that choosing to walk away is not giving up. It is the bravest thing you will ever do. For the fourth time that night, her phone buzzed. Grace Holloway watched the screen light up with a photo of her husband smiling at her. It was from their wedding in Nantucket 4 years ago, back when Derek used to answer her calls. With a trembling hand, she accepted the call. "Derek, please, you have to listen. Something is very wrong with the twins. I cannot feel them moving anymore. The pain is getting so much worse, and I am bleeding. I need you to come home this instant." Her voice broke on the final words. Through the phone, she could hear the distinct sounds of his party for investors. The clinking of champagne flutes, loud laughter, and upbeat music created the unmistakable hum of powerful people making deals. "Gus." Derek's tone was sharp, laced with an impatience that always made her feel insignificant. "I am right in the middle of the investor presentation. This is for the Singapore deal. You are aware of how critical this is. Just take an aspirin and call your doctor. I will be home by 9. Derek, I am so scared. Something feels terribly wrong this time. You said the exact same thing last month during that false labor. And you said it the month before that, when you convinced yourself you had preeclampsia. The doctor confirmed you were perfectly fine. You are just being anxious. Your pregnancy hormones are making you paranoid." Grace looked down at the pure white fabric of her maternity dress. A dark crimson stain was blooming across the front, looking like freshly spilled wine. It was far too much blood. "This is not the same. Please, Derek, I am begging you." He let out a long, heavy sigh. It was the kind of sigh that communicated she was being a burden, overly dramatic, simply too much to handle. "I'll try to get out of here early. Just take a deep breath. You are overreacting. Again." The line went silent. The call ended, leaving Grace standing by herself in their downtown Seattle penthouse as rain streamed down the massive windows. She was 32 weeks pregnant with twins. She was bleeding, cramping, and absolutely terrified, and she had never felt so alone. She glanced at her phone once more. She unlocked it, then locked it again. His smiling face appeared, and then disappeared. It was a nervous habit she had picked up in recent months, as if she were searching for some sign of life from a man who shared her home but felt like he was a million miles away. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked loudly. It was 7:43 in the evening. First, Derek promised he would be home by 6. That turned into 7, then 8, and now 9. She had lost faith in his promises around the 5th month of her pregnancy. A new wave of pain crashed over her. It was intense, feeling like sharp blade nerves were twisting deep inside of her. Grace bent over in agony, her hands gripping the edge of the marble kitchen counter for support. The Harvard sweatshirt she wore, an old one of Derek's she had claimed years ago, was now drenched in sweat. The babies, she needed to feel the babies move. Grace laid her hands on her stomach, waiting and praying for any sign of movement. There was nothing. There was only a terrible stillness where she should have felt the familiar kicks and tumbles of two little lives jostling for room. A voice in her head, the one she had been trying to silence for months, finally spoke with perfect clarity. You need to call 911. Stop waiting for him. He is not coming for you. He never does. Call 911 now. With fingers that shook uncontrollably, Grace grabbed her phone. 911, what is your emergency? I am pregnant with twins, 32 weeks along. Something is terribly wrong. The pain is unbearable, and I see so much blood. Ma'am, can you please tell me your address? Grace recited the address to their downtown penthouse, the kind of address that usually made people take notice. It spoke of money, of influence, of the seemingly perfect life she was supposed to have. In this moment, none of that meant anything. The marble countertops, the expensive furniture, and the sweeping view of Elliott Bay were all worthless. Ma'am, are you currently bleeding? Grace forced herself to look down again. A pool of dark red was growing at her feet, a shocking stain on the white marble. Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Okay, ma'am. Paramedics are on their way. Please stay on the phone with me. Is there anyone there with you? No, I am all alone. Is there someone you can call? A relative? Your husband? A harsh, broken sound escaped her lips that was not a laugh at all. I have been trying to reach my husband all day long. He is too busy. The operator's tone changed, softening with a note of understanding. It was a subtle shift, but it was enough for Grace to realize that this woman got it. She had heard this kind of story before. The pregnant wife and the absent husband. It was a story as old as time itself. Okay, honey. The ambulance is just 3 minutes from you. I need you to find a place to sit down. Can you do that for me? Grace tried to lower herself to the floor, her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed to her knees on the cold marble surface, and the phone slipped from her grasp. She could hear the faint, distant sound of the operator's voice. Ma'am? Ma'am? Are you still there? I need you to talk to me. Grace wanted to answer, but she could not make her mouth form the words. Her vision blurred as the edges of the room began to fade to gray. Her hands moved to her belly, both palms pressing gently against her skin. Please, please be all right. Please. She felt one kick. It was incredibly faint, as weak as a butterfly beating its wings against a window. And then there was nothing. A profound silence. As the darkness started to pull her under, Grace's last clear thought was about all the mistakes she had made. She had stayed with him for too long. She had forgiven him too many times. She had let herself believe that his being busy meant that he still cared about her. She finally understood that busy was just his excuse for choosing everything and everyone over her. The sound of sirens began to break through her fading consciousness. They were getting louder, closer. Help was on its way. It was too late to rescue her marriage. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was not too late to rescue her babies. The paramedics discovered Grace unconscious on the marble floor, lying in a spreading pool of her own blood. We have an unresponsive patient. She is a female, around 30 years old, 32 weeks pregnant with twins. We have major bleeding. It looks like a possible placental abruption. Sarah Mitchell, the younger of the two paramedics, knelt down next to Grace as her partner, Linda, started checking her vital signs. In her 5 years on the job, Sarah had witnessed a lot. Car wrecks, heart attacks, drug overdoses. But cases like this, a pregnant woman bleeding, and all alone, always struck a different chord. Her blood pressure is 80/50. Heart rate is 130. She is going into shock. So, they worked with urgent precision. They started an IV line, placed an oxygen mask over her face, secured her neck, and carefully moved her onto the gurney. Sarah took in the details around her. The lavish penthouse, the professionally framed wedding photos on the wall, a handsome man in an expensive suit, a radiant bride in a delicate lace gown. They both looked so young, full of hope, and deeply in love. Now, that same bride was unconscious and fighting for her life by herself. In the ambulance, Grace's eyelids fluttered open. She was disoriented and afraid. "My babies," she whispered. "Are my babies going to be okay?" Sarah gently took her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "We are taking you to the hospital. You're going to be fine. Can you tell me your name?" "Grace. My name is Grace Holloway." "All right, Grace. Do you know how many weeks pregnant you are?" 32 weeks. It is twins, a boy and a girl. Are they still alive? You have to tell me if they are still alive." Sarah glanced at the fetal monitors. She saw them on the monitor. 2 distinct heartbeats, rapid but steady. They were fighters. They are hanging on. All 3 of you are fighters. Is there anyone we should call for you? Your husband? Another family member? Grace's expression crumbled. "My husband, Derek. His name is Derek Holloway. You can find his number in my phone." Linda located the phone, dialed the number, and set it to speaker mode. It rang 4 times before he answered. Derek's voice came through the speaker, his words slurred with alcohol and annoyance. "I already told you that I would call you back." Sarah responded immediately, her voice calm and professional, but with an icy edge. "Mr. Holloway, this is the City Memorial paramedic team. We are currently transporting your wife. She has a suspected placental abruption. She is 32 weeks, along with a twin pregnancy. Her condition is life-threatening. We need you to come to Mercy General Hospital immediately." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. The sounds of the party filtered through clearly: music, laughter, and the unmistakable clink of champagne glasses. "I am sorry, but this is a really inconvenient time. I mean, how serious are we actually talking about here?" Sarah's jaw tightened, a small muscle twitching in her cheek. Grace saw it, and so did Linda. "Sir, your wife is hemorrhaging. Your unborn children are in distress. She could die. This is as serious as it can possibly be. We need you at the hospital right now." "Right, okay. I will try to get there as soon as I can." Try. The word just hung there in the ambulance, thick and poisonous. "Sir, this is not a situation where you try. This is a situation where you come now. Your wife needs you." "I understand what you are saying. I will be there." Then he disconnected the call. There was no, "Is she conscious?" No. "Please tell her I love her." No. "I am on my way." There was only a dismissive, "I will be there," followed by the click of the phone hanging up. Sarah looked over at Grace. Their eyes locked. A moment of shared understanding between 2 women. The shared look of understanding from this stranger was somehow more painful than the physical agony. It was because it was recognition. Someone else had finally seen the truth. Someone else had witnessed his coldness. It was validation that she was not insane, not overly emotional, not dramatic as Derek had always insisted. This was real. Her husband had just been informed that his wife was on the verge of death, and his response was that he would try to show up. Try? The rest of the ambulance ride became a blur. Red and white lights flashed against the windows outside. The piercing wail of the siren seemed to fade, unable to compete with the storm of memories inside Grace's head. The memory of Derek missing their first ultrasound appointment surfaced. The merger meeting was moved up, Grace. You understand, do you not? It is only one appointment. She had understood. She always made sure to understand. She remembered Derek missing their gender reveal party because he was at a conference in Tokyo. She remembered slicing into the cake by herself, revealing the pink and blue layers that announced their twins. Her mother had held her as she cried, saying, "He is just working so hard for his family." But was he really? Then there was their 4th anniversary just 3 months ago. He had called to cancel their special dinner at the place he proposed. It was a last-minute client dinner. It could not be helped. She had eaten Chinese food from a carton, alone in their bedroom, flipping through their wedding album and trying to pinpoint the exact moment he stopped looking at her as if she was the most important person in the world. She remembered last Thursday night, when she had finally gathered the courage to ask him directly, modeled, "Do you still love me?" Derek's eyes remained glued to his laptop screen. "Of course I do. Don't overreact." It wasn't a simple yes. It wasn't more than anything. It wasn't even, "What are you talking about?" Just a curt dismissal, as if her feelings were a bother, a complication he had to deal with, a flaw in his perfectly organized life. "Grace, you need to stay with us." Sarah's voice broke through the fog. "We are almost at the hospital. Just 2 more minutes. Keep your breathing steady." Grace tried to concentrate on her breath. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Her hands lay flat on her swollen belly, feeling the taut skin. "I am so sorry," she whispered to her unborn children. "I'm sorry it took me so long to leave. I'm sorry I let him convince me, else I was losing my mind. I'm sorry your father is the kind of man who doesn't show up." One of the babies gave a small kick in response. It was weak, but it was there. A little fighter, just like their mother was determined to become. The ambulance doors burst open, revealing the emergency bay of Mercy General Hospital. It was a chaotic scene of bright lights, rushing medical staff, and controlled urgency. A woman in surgical attire hurried toward them. She had dark hair pulled back tightly and an air of complete command. Her name badge read, "Dr. Caroline Cross, obstetrician, gynecologist. My name is Dr. Cross. Grace, are you able to hear me?" Grace managed a nod. "We are taking you directly into an emergency C-section. Your twins are showing signs of distress. We have to deliver them right now. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes? Is your husband with you?" Grace's voice cracked with emotion. "No." "Is he on his way?" "He told me he would try to make it." A muscle in Dr. Cross's jaw twitched. A dark, furious look flashed in her eyes, barely restrained. "Is there anyone else we can contact? Your parents? A friend? Anybody at all?" Grace's mind was a complete blank. Her mother was in Florida visiting her sister. Her closest friend, Marissa, was working a double shift at a different hospital on the other side of the city. "There is no one. I am all alone." Dr. Cross's expression shifted, softening for a brief moment before hardening again with resolve. "In that case, you have me. I will not leave your side. I give you my word." They began wheeling Grace toward the operating room. She watched the ceiling tiles glide past overhead, counting them. It gave her something to focus on other than the overwhelming fear. 37 tiles. Then they passed through the doors of the surgical suite. As the anesthesia mask was placed over her face, Grace had one last clear thought. She had stayed in her marriage for far too long. She had forgiven far too much. She had made herself smaller and smaller, hoping that if she just needed less from him, Derek would finally give her something. But you cannot make someone love you by shrinking yourself. She understood that now. It was too late. But she finally understood. Her world faded to black. Nathan Cross sat in the sterile surgical waiting room, his hands clenched together and his jaw set tight, wondering what on earth he was doing there. Just 20 minutes earlier, he had been attending the Children's Hospital Gala. It was a $1,000 per plate dinner. He was dressed in a tuxedo and bow tie, mingling with wealthy donors. He was giving speeches about why it was so important to be there for children in need. That was when his phone had buzzed. It was Caroline, his sister. "Nathan, I need you to get to Mercy General immediately." She offered no explanation. Her voice was filled with an urgency that told him not to ask questions, just to get moving. So he moved. He walked off the stage in the middle of his speech. He ran to his car. He sped through the Seattle traffic as if his life depended on it. And that brought him here, sitting by himself in an empty waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, waiting for an explanation. The television in the corner was showing the news with the sound turned off. Some political drama was unfolding. The world kept spinning as if everything was normal. But Nathan wasn't paying attention to the news. He was thinking about Derek Holloway. In the world of biotechnology and pharmaceuticals, everyone knew Derek Holloway. People either admired the man or despised him. Nathan was firmly in the group that despised him. 2 years prior, Derek's company, Holloway Pharmaceuticals, had filed a lawsuit against Nathan's company, Crosstech Biomedical, for patent infringement. They falsely claimed that Nathan's revolutionary cancer treatment was developed using their research. It was a complete fabrication, a malicious and calculated lie created to steal 5 years of Nathan's hard work. The court battle lasted for 6 months. It cost him $2 million in legal expenses. In the end, Nathan won. The judge dismissed Holloway Pharma's lawsuit, calling it frivolous and without merit. Derek had stood on the courthouse steps and smiled. He actually smiled. He told the reporters, "Sometimes you have to take a risk. This one didn't pay off. No hard feelings." But Nathan certainly had hard feelings. 6 months ago, at another industry event, Derek had backed Nathan into a corner at the bar. He was 3 drinks in and feeling nasty. "Are you enjoying your little victory cross? If you're talking about the lawsuit where you tried to steal my research, then yes, I am." Derek leaned in very close. His breath smelled strongly of whiskey. "Be careful. Pride goes before a fall. I have been speaking with some investors, just mentioning some worries about your testing procedures. Ethical worries. Nothing solid. Just worries." 3 weeks after that, Nathan's company was put under investigation. It was started by an anonymous tip about unethical testing. The investigation cleared them of any wrongdoing, but the harm had already been done. Their stock price fell by 15%. 2 of their most important investors backed out. Derek Holloway was responsible for that. Nathan had spent the last 6 months imagining all sorts of revenge scenarios. None of them were legal, but all of them were very satisfying. So, when Caroline had called and said Derek's name, Nathan's immediate thought was to refuse. Whatever Derek Holloway needed, he could go to hell for it. But then Caroline spoke 5 words that changed his entire perspective. His wife is dying alone. So now Nathan sat in the waiting room, his hands still tightly clasped, thinking about his mother. It was 20 years ago. Cancer, it was already at stage 4 when they discovered it. His father had visited her only twice in 8 months. He was too consumed with his business. He was too important to sit by the side of his dying wife. She passed away alone in a Boston hospital room at 2 in the morning. A nurse discovered her. The family was called at 6. Nathan's father had been in Singapore attending a conference. He did not get home until 18 hours later. Nathan was only 14 at the time. He was away at a boarding school. He made a vow that day that he would never be like his father. He would never be too busy for the people who were important to him. He would never allow someone to die alone because he had more important things to do. And yet, there he was, 40 years old, working 80-hour weeks. No relationship had ever lasted for more than 3 months. He solved problems with money instead of with his presence. He had become his father after all. The waiting room doors swung open. Caroline walked in. She was still wearing her surgical scrubs. Her hair was damp with sweat. There was a smear of blood on her sleeve. The exhaustion was etched deep into her face. Nathan quickly stood up. "Caro?" When she saw him, her expression softened. "You made it." "Of course I made it. How is she?" Caroline led him into a quiet part of the hallway, away from the other people in the waiting room, away from anyone who might be listening. The twins are alive. They were born at 32 weeks. They are small, but they are strong. A boy and a girl. 3 pounds, 12 ounces, and 4 pounds, 1 ounce. They are in the neonatal intensive care unit. And Grace? Caroline Diet's face grew dark again. She lost a great deal of blood. It was a placental abruption, a complete separation. If it had been another 20 minutes, we would have lost all 3 of them. A knot formed in Nathan's stomach. A woman he had never even met had come close to death. Perhaps she was still dying. But she is in stable condition now. For the time being, she's had blood transfusions, stitches. It will take her weeks to recover, but she is alive. Where is Derek? A look of pure rage flashed in Caroline's eyes. He is not here. He never even came. Not yet. I instructed the nurses to call him 3 times while she was in surgery. Every call went directly to his voicemail. Nathan's hands tightened into fists. That was more than an hour ago. I am aware. His wife nearly died. I am aware. His children were just born. I know that, Nathan. Caroline pushed a hand through her hair, making it stand up in messy, stressed-out spikes. I have been a doctor for 12 years. I have dealt with deadbeat dads, absent fathers, men who disappear when life gets difficult. But this situation? She called him 4 times, pleading with him, bleeding, absolutely terrified, and he chose to go to a party. What kind of person does that? The kind of person who does not deserve her. Nathan took out his phone. He had Derek's private cell phone number, the number Derek had given him during the lawsuit. Call me if you decide you want to settle. Nathan had never used that number until this moment. He dialed. The phone rang 3 times before Derek answered, his voice sounding cheerful and intoxicated. "Cross, isn't it a bit late for a business conversation? Your wife almost lost her life tonight." There was a pause. Nathan could hear music and laughter in the background. Derek made no effort to move to a quieter area. "What?" "Grace, your pregnant wife, she had a hemorrhage. An emergency C-section. Your twin babies are in the neonatal intensive care unit. She is in the recovery room, and you are attending a party." There was a longer silence this time. The party noise in the background did not stop. There was no sense of urgency in his voice, no panic, only confusion. "I'm sorry, how do you know about my wife?" "Because somebody needed to be here for her, since you obviously could not be bothered. Now you wait just 1 minute. She tried to call you 4 times. Were you aware of that? 4 calls while she was bleeding out on your bathroom floor. 4 voicemails where she begged you to come home. And you told her you would try to make it. Try. As if she were a dentist appointment you might be able to fit in if the traffic was not too bad." "I was in a very important meeting." "No, you are at a party. I can hear it clearly. Champagne bottles popping, music playing, people laughing. Your wife was dying, and you were drinking champagne with investors." Derek's tone hardened. "You have no idea what you are talking about, Cross. You are attempting to interfere in my marriage." "Room 847, Mercy General. Just in case you have any interest in meeting your children." Nathan ended the call. Caroline stood there watching him. "Do you feel any better?" "No." Nathan dropped heavily into one of the plastic chairs. I feel much worse, because now I am absolutely certain he is not just a terrible businessman. He is a complete monster. What do you plan to do now? Nathan looked directly at his sister. He really looked at her. He saw the deep exhaustion, the righteous anger, the fierce desire to protect her patient. I am going to sit with her, so that she will not be alone when she wakes up. Nathan, you do not have to do that. Yes, I do. Someone has to be there, and it is obvious that Derek is not going to be that person. Caroline nodded her head slowly. Room 847, the recovery ward. She should be waking up in about 30 minutes. I will be there. Thank you for coming, for showing you care, for being nothing at all like him. Nathan got to his feet and adjusted his bow tie. I'm happy you made the call. He started walking toward room 847, completely unaware he was about to meet the very woman who would alter the course of his life. Grace's eyelids fluttered, revealing a world of fluorescent lights and beeping sounds. She saw the ceiling, a grid of white tiles. She saw medical machines. The air smelled sharp, like antiseptic. A hospital. Her hands instinctively went to her belly. It was flat, empty. A wave of panic crashed over her. No, 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 no. Her voice was a hoarse whisper. It did not sound like her own. My babies! Where are my babies? A nurse entered the room. She was young, with kind eyes and a name tag that read, Rachel Thompson. Mrs. Holloway, you are safe now. You are in the recovery room. Your babies are doing well. They are in the neonatal intensive care unit. You have a son and a daughter. They are small, but they are fighters. Grace burst into tears, a chaotic mix of relief, fear, and a love so intense it hurt. Can I see them? Very soon. We need your condition to be stable first. You lost a significant amount of blood. Dr. Cross performed wonderfully. You are going to be fine. How long was I unconscious? For about an hour. The operation was a success. Grace's next question was automatic, a reflex honed by 4 years of marriage. Where is Derek? Rachel's friendly expression changed, just slightly, but Grace noticed. The nurse knew. Somehow, she already knew. Let me go check on that for you, dear. Then she was gone. Grace lay in the hospital bed, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. She began to count the tiles. 37 tiles long, 23 tiles wide. That made 851 tiles in total. It had been 37 minutes since she woke up. And still no Derek. As the fog of morphine cleared from her mind, the painful process of understanding began. My body just went through the most frightening experience of my life. I was taken into surgery, not knowing if I would wake up, if my children would make it, or if this was my last day on earth. And he is not here. He is still not here. What does that mean? No, I know exactly what it means. I have known for months. It means I am on my own. I have been on my own. I was alone in our marriage long before I was alone in that ambulance. The late nights at the office, of course, all those nights he came home with the scent of a perfume she did not wear. She had convinced herself it was from a client meeting, or a friendly hug from a coworker. Something harmless. It was not harmless. She remembered the way he would flinch when she reached for him, as if her touch was unwelcome. She remembered the way he smiled at his phone, a smile she had not seen aimed at her for years. There was another woman. Of course, there was another woman who would stay with the predictable pregnant wife when someone new and exciting was waiting, someone who did not snore, someone whose body was not swollen and changing, someone who asked for nothing from him except the things he was already giving away. His focus, his time, his love. The very things he once gave to Grace, the things she had pleaded for, the things he had chosen to give to someone else. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Grace's heart leaped. Finally, it had to be Derek. But it was not Derek. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, with dark hair, and looked to be about 40. He wore a tuxedo, but his bow tie was undone. He seemed awkward and out of place, yet his eyes were full of kindness. "Hello, my name is Nathan. Nathan Cross. My sister is Dr. Cross, Caroline. She was your surgeon." Grace just stared at this total stranger, standing in her hospital room. "I am sorry. What did you say?" "I realize this is very unusual, a stranger just showing up like this. But Caroline called me. She told me you were by yourself, and I just thought maybe you should not be. Not on a night like this." Grace's eyes welled up with tears. She fought to hold them back, but she could not. "Why would you do that? You do not even know who I am." Nathan took a hesitant step into the room. "May I sit down?" Grace managed a nod. He took the chair next to her bed and placed 2 cups of awful hospital coffee on the bedside table. "My mother passed away in a hospital room 20 years ago. She was alone. My father was away on business in Singapore. Carolyn and I were both away at college. A nurse found her the next morning. She had been gone for hours. She died all alone because we were all busy somewhere else, doing things we thought were important, living our lives." Grace's breath hitched in her throat. "I can never fix that. I cannot go back in time and be with her when she needed me. But when Caroline called tonight and said you were in here by yourself after nearly dying, I felt like I had to come. I hope that makes sense. You really did not have to do this. I am aware of that, but I wanted to." Nathan reached for one of the coffee cups and offered it to her. "This coffee is terrible. It came from a vending machine down the hall. But at least it is warm." Grace accepted it, her hands trembling. They sat together in a comfortable silence for a moment. Then, Grace asked the one question she already knew the answer to. "Where is my husband?" Nathan's expression hardened. "I called him. It was about 30 minutes ago. I let him know you were here and that the babies had been born. He said he would try to get here." "Try? Yes, try?" Grace let out a laugh. It was a terrible, broken sound. "Of course, he will try. He is excellent at trying. He just never seems to actually succeed, does he?" "I am so sorry. Do not be. This is not your fault. It is mine. For staying with him. For believing him every single time he promised things would be different. For making up excuses for him. For telling myself that him being busy meant he still loved me. This is not your fault." "Is it not? I saw all the warning signs, the late nights, the emotional distance, the way he pulled back from me. I knew something was wrong, but I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid, overly dramatic, exactly what he always told me I was." "You are not crazy. How can you be so sure?" "Because I heard him on the phone. When the paramedics called him, and when I called him, both times, he chose to be somewhere else. That is not you being dramatic. That is him choosing to be absent." Grace began to cry. These were not quiet tears. They were ugly, heaving sobs that came from a place deep inside her. The kind of sobs she had been suppressing for months, or maybe even years. Nathan did not offer any empty reassurances. He did not say, "I'm sure he is on his way," or, "He loves you, he is just not good at showing it." He simply moved his chair a little closer and sat there with her. He was present. "I know you are in pain. I am sorry." Just 3 simple words. "I am sorry." It was the first honest thing she had heard all night. It was the first time someone acknowledged that what had happened to her was unfair, that she deserved to feel hurt. Grace cried even harder. Nathan remained with her, patient, quiet, simply there. 10 minutes went by, then 15, then 20. Suddenly, the door flew open with a bang. Derek Holloway had finally made his appearance. Derek stormed into the room like a force of nature. He was still wearing his expensive designer suit, a Tom Ford charcoal gray. His hair was perfectly styled, not a single strand out of place. His tie was loosened just enough to suggest that he had been worried and had rushed over. But Grace knew the truth. He smelled of champagne and costly cologne. His face was flushed, but from alcohol, not from a desperate run through the hospital to get to his wife's side. The eyes swept across the room, first landing on Grace and then on Nathan. His expression instantly changed. He recognized him. And then came the rage. "What in the hell are you doing in my wife's room?" Nathan stood up slowly, deliberately. All 6 feet and 2 inches of him unfolded from the small chair. He spoke in a low, steady voice. He did not have to shout. "I was here." 3 words, simple, and utterly devastating. Derek's face turned a deep shade of red. "Get out. Right now." "Derek?" Grace's voice was barely a whisper. She was trying. Derek ignored her, his eyes fixed on Nathan. "Not you. Him. I do not know what kind of stunt you are trying to pull, Cross. But my wife just came out of surgery, and I will not let you take advantage of her while she is in a vulnerable state." "I am aware she had surgery." Nathan's voice remained unnervingly calm. "I was here." He repeated the words, this time more slowly. Each word felt like a tiny cut. "You son of a—" Derek lunged at him. Nathan did not budge. He did not even flinch. Grace's voice sliced through the tension. "Stop!" Both men froze in place. "Derek, he is telling the truth. He was here. You were not." Derek finally turned to look at his wife. He truly looked at her for the first time since he had burst in. She was pale, with an IV line in her arm. She wore a standard hospital gown. Her hair was damp with sweat. She looked exhausted and beautiful and vulnerable. His wife. But she was not looking at him in the way she always had before. There was no hope left in her eyes. There was no relief that he was finally there. There was no forgiveness just waiting for him. There was just nothing. "Grace, you are being emotional. You just had a major operation. The anesthesia, the pain medication. You are not thinking straight. Actually, I am thinking with perfect clarity." "No, you are not. You do not realize what you are saying. This man is my biggest rival in business. He despises me. He has probably been in here filling your head with all sorts of lies. I called you 4 times. Her voice was firm now and gaining strength. Derek blinked, quickly changing his strategy. "I was in a critical meeting with investors. You know how important this Singapore deal is. This is a make-or-break moment for the company. I was trying to secure our future. I was bleeding out. I thought I was going to lose our babies." "You are always thinking something is wrong." Derek's voice shifted to that tone, the patient, yet annoyed tone, the one he always used that made Grace feel like she was losing her mind. "Last month, you thought they were Braxton Hicks contractions. The month before that, you were convinced you had preeclampsia. The doctor told you that you were fine. You are paranoid, Grace. It is the pregnancy hormones making you—" "I almost died tonight." "Do not be so dramatic. I almost died." A heavy silence filled the room. The only sound was the steady beeping of the machines, keeping time, keeping her alive. "And you were not here. You chose a group of investors over me, over our own children." "That is not fair. You are twisting my words. I was working. I was providing for this family. When was the last time you actually chose me, Derek?" Derek opened his mouth, then closed it. He tried again. "That is not a reasonable question. When was the last time you touched me without me having to start it? When was the last time you even asked me about my day, or how I was feeling, or about the babies? When was the last time you looked at me the same way you look at your phone every time it buzzes?" "Grace, I work 14-hour days to give us the life we have. This penthouse, your car, the private schools our children are going to attend, everything you own is because I work my fingers to the bone. I do not care about the penthouse. Derek stopped talking. He blinked. What did you say? I wasn't thinking about the fancy apartment, the luxury car, or the expensive private schools. All I could think about was you, about our life together. But that life doesn't exist anymore, does it? There is only you, your job, your phone, and whatever you do when you are away from home. And then there is me, just waiting. I am always waiting. Grace's thoughts were finally crystal clear. She had no more questions, no more uncertainty. For 3 years, I have been the one to say sorry. I apologized for needing him, for wanting him to come home. I said sorry for asking where he was, for feeling alone. I apologized for being pregnant, for being uncomfortable and emotional. I was sorry for simply existing in a way that was inconvenient for him. But I am finished apologizing. I am not the one who did this. He did. He made this choice. Every single night he worked late, every call he missed, every time he looked at me like I was a problem instead of his wife. He chose all of this. And now I am choosing myself. She looked at him and said, "Leave." Derek just stared at her blankly. What did you say? I said, "Leave. I do not want you in this room. Grace, you are not thinking straight. It is the medication from the surgery. I am thinking with more clarity than I have in years. Leave. She told you to leave." That was Nathan's voice. It was soft but strong. Derek turned to face him. This is all your fault. You turned her against me. You came in here with your sob story and made my own wife hate me. Your wife was alone and she almost died. For the first time, Nathan raised his voice, letting out his contained anger. You were drinking champagne, charming investors, and doing God knows what else at your party. Meanwhile, your wife was bleeding out on your bathroom floor. She called you 4 times. 4. She was begging for help, bleeding, and scared to death. And you told her you would try to make it. You talked to her like she was a dental appointment you might fit in if the traffic was not too bad. You have no idea about the kind of pressure I am under. What I do know is that I cannot stand you. I have hated you for years. You attempted to steal my work. You tried to ruin my business. You are a liar and a cheat, and you represent everything that is wrong with our industry. But this? Nathan moved a step closer to him. This shows you are something far worse than a terrible businessman. This shows you are a coward who left his wife all alone when she was in desperate need of his help. Derek's hands tightened into fists. Get out of here before I have security remove you. Go ahead and call them. I would be happy to tell hospital security why Grace's husband arrived 3 hours late, while a complete stranger had to sit with her because she had no one else. A buzz came from Derek's pocket. It was his phone. He glanced down at it. It was an automatic reaction. He could not stop himself. Grace saw the look on his face change. It softened, just for a moment. She knew that look. She had seen it many times before. It was on his face when he would read text messages late in the evening. It was there when he would take phone calls in another room. It was the look he had when he smiled at his phone screen as if it held a special secret. That look was never for her. It had never once been for her. Who is she? Derek stood completely still, his phone in his hand. What are you talking about? I said, who is she? The woman you are texting. The woman who can make you smile that way. The woman you obviously wish you were with at this very moment. Who is she? All the color drained from Derek's face. And in that instant, Grace knew. A part of her had known all along, but this was the confirmation she needed. Derek just stood there motionless, his phone in his hand, his face as white as a ghost. Grace, it is not what it looks like. Stop. Her voice was now like steel. It was cold, firm, and final. Do not you dare lie to me at this moment. Not in this place, not after all this. Tell me the truth. For just one time in your life, be honest with me. The room was silent. The only sound was the beeping of the machines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steady beeps. Each beep was like a clock, ticking away the final moments of their marriage. How long has this been going on? Derek stared down at the floor. Grace, please. How long? For 6 months? The world seemed to spin around her. 6 months. Grace quickly did the math in her head. She was 7 months pregnant. You began having an affair with someone else after I was already pregnant. It is not that simple. Then what is it like? Please, I want you to explain it to me. Help me make sense of it. Help me understand how you could start sleeping with another woman while I was at home carrying your children. Nathan quietly took a step backward, trying to give them some privacy, but he remained in the room. His presence felt solid and reassuring, like an anchor. Derek ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time that night. You were different. As soon as you found out you were pregnant, your entire focus shifted to the baby. And then it became about the babies. Our lives revolved around doctor's visits, what color to paint the nursery, and what to name them. I started to feel like I was being pushed aside. I felt like I was no longer important to you. Grace let out a laugh. It was a terrible, bitter, and broken sound. So, you decided to push me out of your life instead. I never intended for it to happen. It just happened. Things became messy, and I did not know how to end it. Who is she? Derek paused for a moment. Derek, tell me her name. It is Vanessa. The name felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of her. Vanessa? Nathan's voice was sharp and filled with anger. Are you talking about Vanessa Reed, your own executive assistant? Derek's lack of response was all the confirmation they needed. Grace's thoughts were racing. Vanessa Reed. She was 28 years old, stunningly beautiful, with an MBA from Stanford. She was always dressed impeccably and was constantly by Derek's side. Grace had met her on several occasions. She had seen her at company parties and holiday gatherings, and in Derek's office. She had smiled at her, engaged in polite conversation, asked about her family, and even complimented her on her clothes. Just last Christmas, Grace had baked her some homemade cookies from her grandmother's recipe. They were chocolate chip with a sprinkle of sea salt. Vanessa had even sent a thank you note. It read, "You are so incredibly sweet. Derek is so lucky to have you. Derek is so lucky to have you." The trip to Hawaii, Grace said, her voice strangely calm. It was last March, for the pharmaceutical conference. The look on Derek's face gave him away before he could even speak. She was with you there, was not she? Grace, I was the one who packed your suitcase for that trip. I put in your favorite sunscreen and your blue swimming trunks. I even hid a small note inside your bag. It said that I loved you and that I was already missing you. Did you ever read it? Or did she discover it before you did? Derek remained silent. I want an answer. I read it. And what happened after that? Did you go to her hotel room? Grace, please, do not do this to yourself. Answer my question. Yes, all right? Yes. I went to her room. Grace shut her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then opened them again. The evening I told you that we were going to have twins. It was May 15th, our 4-year wedding anniversary. I cooked your favorite meal. I put on the dress you bought for me when we were in Paris. I had the ultrasound pictures in a beautiful frame. There were 2 tiny heartbeats, twins. I was beyond excited to share the news with you. Derek's composure completely fell apart. You arrived home 3 hours late. You told me there was heavy traffic on the bridge. Grace. You were with her, on our anniversary, on the very day I learned we were having twins. You were with her. It was not supposed to be anything serious. It was a mistake. It was only supposed to be one time. But then it just kept happening, and I did not know how to make it stop. You make it stop by stopping. You make it stop by not going to her, by not sending her text messages, by not choosing her over your pregnant wife every single day for the past 6 months. Do you have feelings for her? Derek did not give an answer. Derek, are you in love with her? I am not sure. Are you in love with me? Of course I. Stop. Grace's voice cracked with emotion. Do not say it unless you truly mean it. Do you still love me? Me, the woman you chose to marry, the mother of your unborn children. Are you still in love with me? Derek looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time, and he said absolutely nothing. His silence was her answer. Get out. To Grace, we can work through them. We can go to marriage counseling. I will break things off with Vanessa. I will cease all communication with her. We are about to have children together. We have to at least try. She has asked you to leave. Nathan's voice was now laced with a threat. She has told you multiple times. So, go, before I have to personally show you the door. You need to stay out of this, Cross. This is a private matter between my wife and me. You mean the wife you cheated on? The wife you left all alone? The wife who was close to dying tonight because you were too preoccupied with your assistant to answer her calls? Derek lunged toward Nathan. Nathan moved out of the way with ease. It was a practiced move, as if he had been expecting it. Derek lost his balance and stumbled, catching himself against the wall. I could report you for assault, Nathan stated calmly. Hospitals have security cameras everywhere. It would be very well recorded. Derek adjusted his jacket, trying to pull himself together. This is not finished. Yes, it is. Grace's voice was soft but final. You were the one who ended it 6 months ago when you made your choice to be with her. You ended it today when you chose to ignore my calls. You ended it when you finally showed up here 3 hours late, smelling of champagne. It is finished, Derek. You need to accept that. You are going to live to regret this. The only thing I am going to regret is that I did not leave you sooner. Derek's gaze shifted between Grace and Nathan one last time. He was thinking, considering his next move. He was smart enough to know when he had lost. You will be hearing from my attorneys. He turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. The room became quiet again, with only the sound of the machines. They beeped at a steady rhythm, keeping Grace alive. Grace stared at the closed door for a very long time. Then she began to tremble. She was not crying, she was shaking. Her entire body was trembling. It was as if all the adrenaline that had been coursing through her was finally gone. All the fear, all the courage it had taken to say all those things. It had all disappeared. She felt completely drained. Nathan moved back to the chair and sat down. He did not say a word. He just sat there with her. Grace continued to shake for 5 whole minutes. At last, the trembling subsided. She turned to look at Nathan. This man, a complete stranger, had witnessed her at her most vulnerable moment. Thank you, she said. You do not need to thank me for anything. Yes, I do. You remained here, with me. You did not have to, but you did. I had a feeling, Grace said in a low voice. Deep down inside, I knew that something was not right. The late nights at the office, the way he became distant, the scent of another woman's perfume on his clothes. But I convinced myself that I was just being insecure, that I was being overly suspicious. I told myself that it was just the pregnancy hormones making me act crazy. You are not crazy. I should have said something to him a long time ago, months ago, instead of just, no. Nathan's voice was firm. Do not do that to yourself. Do not do what? Do not take the blame for the choices he made. He was the one who cheated. He was the one who lied. He was the one who manipulated you. He made you question your own sanity. That is his fault. It is not yours. But I noticed all the warning signs. And he lied to you about them. He probably made you feel guilty for even bringing them up. Am I right? Grace nodded, as tears streamed down her cheeks. That is a classic example of narcissistic abuse. They twist things around to make you question your own sense of reality. They make you believe that you are the one with the problem, that you are too demanding, too sensitive, or too jealous. But you were not any of those things. You were correct all along. Your intuition was right. He was just very good at lying. Grace gazed out the window as a new day began, coloring the city skyline with streaks of pink and orange. She had been awake for 24 straight hours. In that time, she had delivered twins, faced death, and discovered her husband's affair, which led to the end of her marriage. And yet, the sun still rose. There was a certain beauty in that, a glimmer of hope. The world does not pause for a broken heart. It continues on. That meant she could find a way to continue on, too. A nurse named Rachel appeared at her door. Mrs. Holloway? Do you feel well enough to go see your babies? In that moment, everything else vanished. The pain, the betrayal, the complete exhaustion. None of it held any importance. Yes. Oh, please, yes. They took Grace to the neonatal intensive care unit in a wheelchair, with Nathan walking right beside her. She had asked him to be there, feeling the need for a friendly face since it was clear Derek was not coming. The unit was a quiet, peaceful place with dim, warm lighting. The only sounds were the soft beeps from tiny heart monitors. Nurses glided by silently, and parents sat next to incubators, their faces full of hope and prayer. Rachel brought them to 2 incubators placed next to each other. One was labeled Baby Girl Holloway, 3 pounds, 12 ounces. The other read Baby Boy Holloway, 4 pounds, 1 ounce. 2 miniature human beings, unbelievably small and utterly perfect. They were connected to wires and tubes, far too many for such little bodies. But they were breathing, moving, and alive. Emma was blessed with a full head of dark hair, just like Derek's. Lucas, on the other hand, was bald and pink, with a nose that was a perfect copy of Grace's. They were both absolutely perfect. Grace began to cry, but these were different tears. They were a mixture of pure joy, deep sorrow, overwhelming love, and intense fear. They are just so small, she whispered. They are little fighters, Rachel said in a gentle voice. Their vital signs are strong, and their oxygen levels are good. Dr. Cross mentioned they are doing exceptionally well for being born at 32 weeks. Grace asked, "Is it okay if I touch them?" "Of course," Rachel replied. Opening a small door on the incubator, Grace slowly reached her finger inside and touched Emma's hand. Emma's tiny fingers immediately wrapped around hers with a surprisingly strong grip. That simple, powerful connection. In that instant, Grace's entire perspective on life shifted. She then reached for Lucas, touching his perfect, tiny hand. A clear voice spoke inside her head. "I refuse to let you grow up seeing your mother settle for emotional scraps. I will not let you believe that love is supposed to feel like loneliness. I will teach you what real strength is. I will show you what self-respect looks like. I will do this even if it means tearing my entire world down and starting from nothing. I will do it even if I have to be a single mother. I will do it no matter how hard it gets, and no matter how scared I feel. I will do this for both of you, and for myself." Speaking aloud, she whispered to them, "Hello, my babies. I am your mom, and I love you. I love you more than words can say. I promise you that I will give you the life you deserve, no matter what it takes." One of the babies gave a little kick. It was Emma, the strong little fighter. Nathan stood a few feet away, just watching, his eyes looking unusually shiny. Grace looked over at him. "Thank you for being here with me." He replied, "There is nowhere else I would rather be." 4 days went by. Grace's body began to heal in the hospital, while her twins remained in the neonatal unit. Derek came to visit just once. He was there for 10 minutes, snapped a few pictures for his social media accounts, and then he left. Nathan, however, came to visit every single day. He brought her good food, coffee, and books that she was too tired to read. He just made sure he was there. On the 4th day, Dr. Caroline Cross entered her room holding discharge papers. "You are healing very well. Your blood count has returned to normal, and there is no sign of infection. You are free to go home today." Grace asked, "When can my twins come home?" "It will likely be about 2 weeks. They are gaining weight and getting stronger each day. Is there a way I can stay here with them?" Carolyn thought for a moment. "We have a family room, but it is a shared space, not private. Grace, you need proper rest in a real bed." Grace fell silent. Home, the penthouse apartment. Puwutan, the place where Derek was, the place where every object was a reminder of the false life she had been living. She had not spoken to Derek since that first night. He had tried calling and texting, and even sent flowers. She had ignored all of it. "Where will you go?" Caroline asked softly. Just then there was a knock on the door, and Nathan walked in. He was holding lunch from that great sandwich shop downtown. He took one look at Grace's expression and stopped. "What is wrong?" he asked. "She is being discharged," Caroline said, "but she does not want to return to her penthouse." Nathan responded without hesitation, "Then do not." "What?" Grace asked. "Do not go back there, at least not right now." "But I have nowhere else to—" "Yes, you do," Nathan interrupted, setting the lunch down. "I have a guest house. It is on my property out in Marin County. It has 3 bedrooms and is completely furnished. It has been sitting empty for the last 6 months. You can stay there." "Nathan, I cannot accept that," Grace said. "Why not?" he asked. "Because we hardly know each other. You do not owe me anything. Besides, people will start rumors." "Let them. You need a safe place to recover. A place where Derek cannot just appear whenever he pleases." "The guest house is completely separate from my home. It is 200 yards away, offering total privacy." "This is just too much," she said. "I have a guest house that is not being used. You need a place to live. Think of it as just solving a logistical problem." Caroline chimed in, "Grace, you should take his offer. You need a calm, stress-free environment. Marin County would be the perfect place for you to recover. I really can't be a burden to you." "You are not a burden," Nathan insisted, his voice firm. "Let me do this for you. Please." Grace stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Nathan found a chair and sat down, taking a deep breath. "I mentioned my mother before, how she passed away all alone. The part I left out was my father's cheating. He had one affair after another, my entire childhood. My mom knew, we all did, but he would deny everything. He made her feel like she was insane for even asking. It sounds just like what Derek is doing to you." Grace felt the air leave her lungs. She spent her entire marriage making excuses for his behavior. She would tell herself she was just being paranoid. She'd say that important men have demanding jobs and she should just be thankful. She died still defending him. "I am so sorry," Grace said softly. "Do not be. That experience taught me everything about the man I never want to be. And it taught me how to spot a narcissist's games from a mile away. What Derek is doing to you, what he has been doing for years, is a classic case. The way he makes you doubt your own sanity. The way he flips the blame onto you. How he makes you question your own reality. You are not going crazy, Grace. You are being abused." That single word seemed to freeze in the space between them. Abused. The thought had never crossed Grace's mind. Derek had never raised a hand to her. He never shouted. He was simply occupied, preoccupied, never there. But she was realizing that abuse could be silent, and she had been living with it for years. "Okay," she finally whispered. "Yes, thank you. I will use the guest house, just for a little while, until I can figure out my next steps. You can stay for as long as you need." Just as Nathan began helping Grace with her belongings, Nurse Rachel came back into the room. "Mrs. Holloway, you have a visitor. Who is it?" "It is your husband," and he brought his lawyer with him. A feeling of dread washed over Grace. They made their way down to the hospital lobby. Derek was standing there, dressed in a brand new navy blue suit. Beside him stood a man who looked to be in his 60s, with silver hair, an expensive briefcase, and the cold eyes of a predator. His lawyer. "Grace," Derek began, "we have to discuss custody." Derek's lawyer took a step forward. The nameplate on his briefcase read, "Richard Brennan, Esquire." "Mrs. Holloway, my name is Richard Brennan, and I am Mr. Holloway's legal counsel. We need to have a conversation about the custody arrangements for the children." Grace's hands tightened on the armrests of her wheelchair. "The babies are still in the neonatal unit." "We are aware of that. We are talking about the arrangements for when they are discharged. Mr. Holloway is ready to file for joint custody, a 50-50 arrangement." "50-50?" Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "It is the standard arrangement in the state of Washington for parents of equal standing." Nathan stepped in front of Grace. "Equal standing?" He was not even present for their birth. Brennan remained unfazed. "Mr. Cross, I do not believe you are a member of this family. This is a private discussion. I am her friend, and I am not going anywhere. We can have this discussion when Mrs. Holloway's attorney is present. Does she have legal representation?" Grace shook her head, "No. In that case, I recommend you find someone immediately. Mr. Holloway is also troubled by your current living situation. Moving in with a man you have known for less than a week brings your judgment and stability into question." At that moment, something inside Grace finally broke. 4 days ago, she would have cowered. She would have apologized and tried to explain herself, but not anymore. "You want to talk about judgment?" Her voice was as cold as steel. "Let us talk about how Derek chose to ignore 4 emergency phone calls while I was hemorrhaging. Let us talk about how he finally showed up 3 hours after his own children were born. Let us talk about how he spent the last 6 months cheating on me with his assistant while I was pregnant with his twins." Brennan's calm expression never wavered. "Mrs. Holloway, marital problems are considered separate from a person's fitness as a parent." "Are they really? Because I would say that a man who cannot make his wife's medical emergency a priority might also have trouble prioritizing the needs of his children. If you are going to start making accusations, these are not accusations. They are facts. They are documented by the hospital's phone logs, statements from the nursing staff, reports from the paramedics, and a dozen voicemails that are still on my phone. Would you care to listen to them? To me pleading with my husband to come home while I was bleeding out on our bathroom floor." Derek finally spoke up. "Grace, you are being completely unreasonable." "No, I am being a mother, and I am finished with you making me feel insane for expecting common human decency." Nathan took out his phone. Mr. Brennan, I strongly suggest your client drop this. Is that a threat? Brennan asked. No, it is a promise. If Derek pursues this custody fight, I will personally pay for Grace's legal representation. We will hire the top divorce lawyers in Seattle. The type of lawyers that charge $2,000 an hour. Your money does not scare me, Mr. Cross. Well, it should, because if this goes to trial, every journalist in this city will get the story of how pharmaceutical CEO Derek Holloway left his pregnant wife during a life-threatening emergency, how he ignored her desperate calls so he could sip champagne with his business partners, how he was cheating on her while she was carrying his own children, and how his mistress is his 28-year-old employee. The color drained from Derek's face. What do you suppose your board of directors will think of that news, or your investors? That Singapore deal is not final yet, is it? Do you really believe they want to be in business with someone whose private life is a train wreck on public display? Brennan shifted his briefcase. These public attacks can go in both directions, you know. Can they? I have evidence. I have hospital charts. I have call logs. I have statements from paramedics, nurses, and doctors. What do you have? Rumors about where Grace is staying? Nathan pressed on. So, this is how things are going to unfold. Grace is going to retain a lawyer. A very good one. You are going to agree to a fair custody plan. Grace will have primary custody. Derek will have supervised visits until the twins are old enough to spend more time away from their mother. Supervised visits are for parents who are unfit. Precisely, Derek lunged. I am not an unfit parent. You missed the birth of your children. You have seen them 2 times in 4 days. You are standing here with an attorney instead of being upstairs with your newborn kids. Tell me what part of that makes you a fit parent. Derek's gaze darted between Grace and Nathan. His face was flushed with anger. His fists were clenched tight. But he was a man of business. He knew how to calculate risks and evaluate outcomes. He recognized a losing battle when he saw one. This is not finished. Yes, it is, Grace stated softly. You put an end to this 6 months ago when you chose her. You put an end to it today when you came here with a lawyer instead of a bouquet of flowers. It is finished, Derek. It is time to accept that. You will live to regret this. The only thing I regret is that I did not leave you much sooner. Derek and Brennan turned and walked out. Grace stayed in the wheelchair, trembling. But it was a new kind of shaking. It was not from fear. It was from adrenaline. It was from her own power. Did that really just happen? It did, Nathan replied. And you were absolutely incredible. Just then, Caroline came around the corner. I heard everything. Grace Holloway, you are officially my new hero. Grace let out a laugh, which turned into a sob, and then back into a laugh. I have no idea what comes next. None of us ever really do, Caroline said. The important part is that you are moving forward anyway. That is all that matters. They made their way to Marin County in Nathan's Tesla. The ride was smooth and silent. Grace watched the Seattle skyline fade in the rearview mirror. I have never confronted him like that in my life. How did it feel? It was terrifying, and it was wonderful. It was really, really wonderful. The estate was breathtaking. It featured modern design with massive windows from floor to ceiling that overlooked the San Francisco Bay. Trees were everywhere, and the air had a fresh, clean scent. The guest house was a separate building from the main residence. It had its own driveway, offering complete privacy. The inside was serene. It had an open floor plan, with white walls and wood floors, filled with comfortable furniture. There were 3 bedrooms, 1 main bedroom, and 2 smaller ones. One of the rooms had already been set up as a nursery. It contained 2 cribs, a changing table, a rocking chair, and had soft, gray curtains. Nathan, when did you manage all of this? Caroline gave me a hand. She is an expert on what babies require. On the kitchen island, a welcome basket was waiting. It was filled with groceries, coffee, prenatal vitamins, and a very soft blanket. A note written in a woman's script read, "Welcome to your new home. You are going to be a wonderful mother. Please call me anytime. It does not matter if it is day or night." Caroline. P.S. Nathan is number 2 on your speed dial. I am number 1. Please use us. Grace lifted the note and read it for the second time. The tears started to fall. Why are you two being so kind to me? Nathan put her bag on the floor. Because you are deserving of kindness. You deserve to have people who are there for you. People who do what they say they will do. People who do not make you plead for basic human kindness. 2 weeks later, the twins were home, Emma and Lucas, each weighing 5 pounds. They were healthy, strong, and absolutely perfect. Grace brought them to the guest house, her temporary refuge that was quickly beginning to feel like a real home. She stood inside the nursery, holding a baby in each of her arms. This was the thing she had been fighting for. It was not for a marriage with a man who did not want to be there. It was for this, for her children, for herself. It was a chance to create something real. Nathan provided help, but never in a way that felt intrusive. He was simply available. He would bring food. He held Emma while Grace was feeding Lucas. He made midnight runs for diapers without ever being asked. He treated Grace as if she were competent and strong, not as if she were broken, not as if she needed to be rescued, just as someone who needed a little support. At 3 a.m. one night, Grace was feeding Lucas. Nathan tapped gently on the door. Still awake? I am starting to believe sleep is a fantasy, Grace replied. She smiled, a tired but authentic smile. Would you like some company? Always. Nathan took a seat in the other rocking chair. It was the one that was supposed to be for Derek, the one Derek would never sit in. They sat together in a comfortable quiet. Lucas made a soft, grunting noise. Emma sighed from her crib. What is the real reason you are doing all of this? Grace asked. I already told you. My mother. I think there is more to the story than just that. Nathan remained silent for a long while. The night Caroline called me, I was at a charity dinner. I was giving a speech about being present for children in need. Then she told me that a woman was dying all by herself because her husband was otherwise occupied. And in that moment, I realized I was becoming just like my father. Too occupied for the things that truly count. Busy building empires instead of building relationships. You are not anything like your father. Am I not? I work 80-hour weeks. I have not had a relationship last longer than 3 months in the last 5 years. I solve problems by throwing money at them instead of my own time until I met you. Until you met me? Helping you is not only about you, it is about becoming the person I wished I had back then, the person my mother needed. It is about discovering the man I want to be, not the billionaire, not the CEO, just me. Grace reached out and took his hand. Thank you for really seeing me, for being here, for not making me feel like I am weak. Grace, you are the strongest woman I have ever known. 6 months went by. The King County Courthouse seemed gray and severe against the November sky. Grace was standing on the steps, her hands shaking just a bit as she prepared to enter for her final divorce proceeding. 6 months had passed since that awful night. 6 months of recovery, of growth, of becoming an entirely new person. Jennifer Morrison, her attorney for the divorce, gently touched her on the arm. Are you ready? Grace gave a nod. She was ready. On the inside, Derek was seated next to Vanessa. They had arrived as a couple. They were holding hands. They both looked absolutely miserable. It appeared that the mistresses do not actually enjoy the reality of being wives, the everyday tasks, the ordinary life, the effort that a true relationship demands. Vanessa seemed worn out. She looked resentful, as if she had been dealt a bad hand. Derek seemed older. His hair was more gray. There were lines around his eyes that were not there before. When Grace looked at them, she felt nothing. Not rage, not a sense of victory, not even pity. She only felt relief that she was not the one sitting in Vanessa's chair. Jennifer laid out the terms of the settlement. Grace Holloway is granted full physical custody of the minor children, Emma Grace Holloway and Lucas James Holloway. Mr. Holloway will have supervised visitation every other Saturday for 4 hours. The supervision requirement will be removed once the children reach the age of 3, provided he maintains regular visits and shows consistent involvement. Child support will be set at $5,000 per month for each child, for a total of $10,000. Regarding marital property, the penthouse has been sold. The profits will be divided 60-40 in Mrs. Holloway's favor as a result of Mr. Holloway's marital misconduct and his abandonment of her during a medical emergency. Derek's attorney attempted to protest. Your Honor, a 60-40 split is unreasonable. Judge Patricia Henderson, a woman in her 60s with a sharp gaze, cut him short. Mr. Brennan, your client engaged in adultery while his wife was carrying a high-risk pregnancy, and he neglected to answer numerous emergency calls, which nearly resulted in his wife dying alone. The 60-40 division is generous. I would advise you to take it before I change it to 70-30. The judge went on, Mr. Holloway, I highly advise that you use your supervised visitations to form a bond with your children. They are entitled to a father who is present. Become that father. The gavel fell. The divorce is granted. Custody is awarded to Mrs. Holloway as specified. This court is adjourned. It was finally done. Grace emerged from the courthouse into the chilly November air. Nathan was there, waiting for her by his car. He had attended the hearing. He had sat in the back, offering silent support. How are you feeling? I feel light, like I have been carrying an enormous burden for years, and I was just able to set it down. That is good. That is very good. They stood together on the steps of the courthouse. Grace was in her navy blue dress. Nathan was in his suit. So what is next for you? Nathan asked. Grace smiled. I am going to enroll in school again, for child psychology. It is an online program. I want to be able to help other women in situations like mine. I want to help them see the signs of narcissistic abuse before they nearly die on a bathroom floor. That is a wonderful goal, Grace. And for a while, I am just going to focus on me. Discover who I am without having someone else tell me who I ought to be. That is a smart plan. Grace paused, then looked Nathan straight in the eye. But after that, after I have had some time to discover who I am, I was wondering if we could get some coffee, real coffee, not the kind that comes from a hospital vending machine. A big smile spread across Nathan's face. I would love that. It would not be a date, not at first. Not at first, Nathan echoed. But it could be someday. It could be someday. Grace started to walk away, but then she paused. She turned back to him. Nathan, I have to tell you something, and I have to say it right now before I talk myself out of it. Nathan's expression grew serious. Okay. 6 months ago, you were there for me, every single day, for every 3 a.m. feeding, for every anxiety attack, for every single moment. You did not have to be there. You had no obligation, but you were there. Grace, he began. Just let me finish. Derek is a stranger to Emma and Lucas. They were only 3 months old the last time he bothered to visit. They have no memory of him, but they remember you. Lucas lights up the moment he hears your voice. Emma sleeps the soundest when she is resting on your shoulder. When they start to cry, you are the one they want. Nathan's eyes were glistening. You are the one changing diapers at 3 in the morning. You sing them their lullabies. You read them stories every single night. You are present. And I need you to know that if you are willing, if you feel ready, I want to become their father, in every official and legal way. Not just a father figure in their hearts, but the name on their birth certificates. Emma and Lucas Cross. Or Cross Holloway. Whatever you prefer. A heavy silence filled the room. Nathan remained perfectly still, his gaze fixed on Grace, his eyes now red. Are you asking me if I want to adopt the twins? I am asking if you want to be their dad. For real. Legally. Not just their Uncle Nathan, but their dad, their daddy, their father. Nathan closed the distance between them, one step at a time. He was right in front of her now. Grace Holloway, these past 6 months have been the absolute highlight of my 40 years on this earth. Nathan, every morning, I wake up excited, knowing I am going to see you, and Emma, and Lucas. It has been a precious gift, a gift I felt I never deserved. But I am thankful for it every single day. I love those children, Emma and Lucas. I love how Lucas instinctively wraps his little hand around my finger, how Emma drifts off to sleep right on my shoulder. I even love their 3 a.m. crying sessions. I love the sweet smell of their hair. I love every single thing about them. Grace felt a lump form in her throat, and I am in love with you. I have been in love with you since that terrible night at the hospital when you showed a strength I had never seen in anyone before. My love for you grows stronger each day. I admire how you fight, how you love your children, how you have pieced your life back together, how you refuse to give up. So my answer is yes. Absolutely yes. 1,000 times over, yes. I want to be their father. I want to sign all the documents. I want to legally change their names. I want to be there for every parent-teacher conference, every single vaccination appointment, every birthday, every Christmas. I want all of it. Grace was now crying, but they were tears of pure joy. But Grace, there is one more thing I want. What is it? Nathan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Grace's hands flew to cover her mouth. This is not at all how I pictured doing this. I had a whole romantic scene planned. A beach, a beautiful sunset, a bunch of candles. But Grace, I have been waiting for 6 months to say this to you, and I can't bear to wait another moment. Nathan then got down on one knee, right then and there, on the steps of the courthouse. Grace Holloway, you make me strive to be a better person, a better man, a better father, a better partner. I cannot promise you perfection. I cannot promise that I will not make mistakes along the way, but I can promise that I will always be there for you. I will always pick up the phone. I will always prioritize you and the children above everything else. Always. Grace, will you marry me? Grace stared at Nathan, the man who had been her rock, the man who had stayed by her side, the man who loved her children as if they were his own. Yes. My answer is yes, 1,000 times. Nathan rose to his feet. He gently slid the ring onto her finger, then he kissed her. Right there on the courthouse steps, passers-by paused to watch. They smiled. A handful of them even applauded. Grace laughed through her tears. I cannot believe this is actually happening. You better believe it. This is real. Every part of it. 18 months had passed. It was a Saturday morning in their Sausalito home. Not the guest house anymore. This was their shared home. The kitchen was filled with bright, warm sunlight. It was a scene of happy morning chaos. Emma and Lucas, who were now 2 years old, sat in matching high chairs. They were dressed in identical pajamas. Pancake pieces were scattered everywhere. Their little fingers were sticky with syrup. They were the picture of pure happiness. Nathan was at the stove, flipping more pancakes. He wore an apron that humorously declared "World's Okayest Dad." Grace was making coffee, her 7 months pregnant belly gently brushing against the kitchen counter. Baby number 3 was on its way. "Daddy, I need more juice," Emma demanded, holding up her sippy cup. Nathan smiled warmly. "What's the magic word, Emmy Bug?" "Please," she lisped sweetly. "That is my girl." He poured her more juice. He leaned over and kissed the top of her head. Lucas started banging his spoon on his high chair tray. "Dada, Dada, up. As soon as we are done with breakfast, little man, you need to eat your pancakes." Grace watched them all. Her heart felt so full she thought it might just burst. This was what a family looked like. It was not perfect. It was messy. It was chaotic. But it was beautiful. Nathan noticed her staring at him. "What is on your mind?" "Nothing really. I am just feeling incredibly happy." "So am I." He walked toward her. He placed a gentle hand on her belly. "How is baby Cross doing in there?" "Very active, kicking up a storm. I have a feeling this one is going to be a soccer player, just like his big brother Lucas." Emma suddenly called out, "Mama, Daddy, look at this." She proudly held up a drawing. It was a crayon creation of stick figures. There was a mama, a daddy, an Emmy, a Luke, and a very tiny baby. "That is absolutely beautiful, sweetheart. That's our family," she announced. "That is right, my love. That is our family." Nathan's voice grew soft. "Grace? Yes? I want to thank you." "For what?" "For allowing me to be their dad, for letting me be your husband, for giving me this, for all of it." Grace reached for his hand. "Thank you for being there, that very first night, and for every single night since then. I will always show up for you, always." Lucas yelled out, "Dada! Pancake! Now!" Nathan let out a laugh. "Duty is calling." Just then the doorbell rang. Grace went to open it. It was a delivery person. "I have a delivery for Nathan Cross?" "That would be us." The man handed her an official-looking envelope. Grace tore it open. She began to read. Tears immediately welled up in her eyes. "Nathan! Nathan, you need to come here right now." Nathan came into the room, holding Lucas on his hip, his shirt smeared with pancake batter. "What is going on? Is everything okay?" Grace held up the paper, her hand trembling. But it was a happy kind of trembling. "It is official. The adoption has been finalized. You are their legal father, Emma and Lucas Cross. It is all done." Nathan carefully set Lucas down on the floor. He took the paper from her. It was a certificate of adoption for Emma Grace Cross and for Lucas James Cross, legal father, Nathan William Cross. The date read November 1st, 2027. Tears began to stream down Nathan's face. "I am officially their dad." "You have always been their dad. This just makes it official in the eyes of the law." Emma waddled over to him. "Daddy is crying?" Nathan scooped her up into his arms. Then he picked up Lucas. He held both of his children tightly. "These are happy tears, Emmy Bug. They are the best kind of tears." "Happy tears?" Emma echoed, clearly delighted. Lucas reached up and patted Nathan's cheek. "Dada, my Dada." "That is right, my little guy. I am your Dada, and I will be forever." Grace placed her hand on Nathan's shoulder. They just stood there for a moment, a family. If this were a scene in a movie, the camera would slowly pull back. It would show the kitchen filled with the morning light, the pancakes still cooking on the stove, the crayon drawings proudly displayed on the refrigerator, the adoption certificate lying on the counter, A family, not perfect, but very real and beautiful. On the wall, there was a professional photograph of Grace, Nathan, Emma, and Lucas. Everyone in the picture was smiling. Underneath it was a small plaque that read, "Family is not always about blood. It is about the people who show up for you, the ones who stay, the ones who love you at your lowest and celebrate you at your best. This is our family. It was built on love. It was built on choice. And it was built to last." Grace's inner voice spoke to her one last time. "A year and a half ago, I was close to dying all alone. Today, I am surrounded by more love than I ever thought was possible. Derek may have given me Emma and Lucas, and for that, I will always be grateful. But Nathan is the one who gave them a father, and he gave me a partner, a true partner, not someone who is only there when it is convenient, but someone who is always there, no matter what. This is my happily ever after, not because it is flawless, but because it is genuine, and it is ours." Emma tugged on the hem of Grace's shirt. "Mama, I am still hungry." Grace let out a laugh. "More pancakes are on their way." Nathan began serving up more pancakes. Emma proudly showed her drawing to everyone one more time. Lucas insisted on having more juice. It was a scene of normal, beautiful chaos. This was exactly what Grace had been fighting for. It was not about financial independence from a millionaire ex-husband, although that certainly helped. It was not about the divorce settlement that granted her freedom, though that was important. It was not even about escaping a relationship with narcissistic abuse, though that had saved her life. What she had fought for was this. She had fought for mornings that were filled with laughter, for children who grew up knowing they were unconditionally loved, for a partner who consistently showed up, for a family that was built on choice and commitment and a deep, real love. Not the kind of love that just looks good on paper, but the kind of love that shines in the messy, wonderful, imperfect reality of everyday life. Grace had almost died alone on a cold bathroom floor, but she did not die. She survived. And in the process of surviving, she rediscovered something she had lost a long time ago. She found herself again. Derek had taken 4 years of her life from her, but she was not going to waste another second thinking about him. This was a new beginning for her and her children, for her and Nathan, and it was absolutely perfect. Not because everything in their life was easy, not because they did not face any challenges, not because it looked like something out of a fairy tale, but because it was real. It was a life they had chosen. It was a life they had earned. Every single day, Grace woke up and chose this life. She chose these people. She chose herself. And every single day, Nathan made the very same choice: to show up and to stay and to love. Not just with his words, but with his actions. It was in the dirty diapers he changed at 3 in the morning, the late night runs to the pharmacy, the way he held Emma while she was getting her shots, the stories he read to Lucas before bed, the pancakes he made every Saturday morning, the act of showing up, always showing up. That was what true love was. It was not about grand, empty gestures. It was not about expensive gifts. It was not about promises that were made only to be broken. It was about the daily, conscious choice to be there, to stay, and to love. Grace had learned the hard way that you cannot make yourself smaller in the hopes of being loved. You cannot apologize your way into feeling like you matter. You can never force someone to choose you. But what you can do is choose yourself. And when you finally do that, the right people will show up. The people who are always supposed to find you. The people who truly see you and decide to stay. Grace had finally found her people, and she had no intention of ever letting them go. The morning sunlight streamed in through the kitchen windows. Lucas let out a happy laugh at something Nathan had just said. Emma showed her drawing to Grace for what must have been the 10th time. Grace's hand rested gently on her pregnant belly. They were having another baby, a girl this time. They had decided to name her Caroline. She would be named after the doctor, who had not only saved Grace's life, but had also inadvertently brought Nathan into it. Everything in her life had finally come full circle. From death to life. From a feeling of deep loneliness to being part of a family. From having only crumbs of affection to having an abundance of love. From suffering through narcissistic abuse to finding a healthy, nurturing love. From completely losing herself to finally finding her way back. This was Grace's story. It was not the story of a victim. It was the story of a survivor. It was the story of a warrior. A woman who came face to face with death and made the conscious decision to live instead. To truly live. Not to just exist. Not to just get by. But to thrive. And she was absolutely thriving, with her children by her side, with her husband, with the life she was living. A life that she had painstakingly built from the ashes of her old one. A life that was messy and imperfect and breathtakingly beautiful. A life that was completely and totally hers. And no one, not Derek, not anyone else, could ever take that away from her again. In the end, Grace Holloway was the one who rescued herself. And in that process, she created a family. A true family. The kind of people who show up when you need them. The kind who do not leave when things get tough. The kind that offers love without any expectations. And that alone changed everything. This content was carefully researched, crafted, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful stories and life lessons. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating content that matters.